Hey, Stroke Alliance, and a little extract from the Hero membership call the other day, and Isaias was walking through fat arrows or lambdas in V2 that created a new thing that you can do anonymous functions, and they're typically called like fat arrows or lambda in a lot of other languages. And so he walks through how to use them, some of the things you need to watch out for. It's a really cool thing. If you like this video, please like the video. It really helps us out. Consider joining the Hero group. These are things we cover every week. This is just one little extract of 3 hours of calls that we had. And of course, you don't have to watch all the calls, but you can, jump through them and see what looks interesting to you and learn. Cheers. Let's cover this one. Let's continue on with talking about functions. And you last time you gave a little bit of but I think 15 minutes is enough to go in the fat arrow lambda a little more than you did last time. So let's just talk
Yeah.
through, the pros and cons of it, when to use it, maybe even mention, because I think you said in the not what's it called, not the beta but the new version.
Oh, the new alpha version, the
Yeah,
2.1. Oh
yeah.
my God. Yeah, that's gonna be funny. Okay. Well, I don't like it that much just because people abuse it. All right. But they are extremely useful. Lambdas and functions that are not named are very useful in a very specific situation. But I guess people will just do it everywhere. And that's okay. Like everybody can code however they prefer. The only thing is what happens afterwards. So let's have a normal function. Let's think about a function that it would get current weather, right? And then you have to put the city here, right? Let me change this to AutoHotkey V2. That's what the function does, sort of. It would have an HTTP object that would connect to something or whatever. Now, the problem here, where's my prompt assistant? What are you doing, dude? Yeah, there's a hot string there. There it is. And so on and so forth. And this thing, what it's gonna do is just send a request somewhere. My problem here is that this function has many lines of code. And in this case, I could set some headers here. I would wait for the response. And then in the end, go ahead and parse the response and then return an object, whatever it is. So it does a few things. This is what a normal function looks like. You have a parameter and so on and so forth. But there are certain functions that you don't need to do that many steps. You just need to do one or two things. And why do you need a full function, so to speak? Well, because you might use it in something else, like set timer. So set timer calls a given function over and over again over a period of time. So let's say that I say, I want to get the current weather every 10 minutes. 60 seconds, that's a minute, 10 of those. Okay, there. So I'm saying, okay, go ahead and get the weather every 10 minutes and do something with it. At this point, when you're doing this, you just name the function that you want, and it is a function that performs a lot of actions. What about if I'm going to create a function or I'm going to call a function that only has one or two actions? Like, for example, let's say reminder to stand up, right? And this function is just a message box. You have to stand from your chair. That's all it does. Well, yeah, I want to do that every 10 minutes. Well, the problem is, come on, why would I have to write this line and also write a function to call a function? Why can't I call that function right there? And that's basically what an anonymous function does. I can simplify the whole thing by saying, I don't need a name for this because it's just going to call a message box. So let's remove the name. And it is just one line. Why do I have to create brackets and have 3 lines when I can just have 1? Well, you can grab this 1 line, put an arrow function here, which returns something, and then the return is going to be a call to a function. That's what a fat arrow function is. It's just a way to simplify a call and create it in 1 line. And basically, if I did this, why don't I do it right there? See what I mean? So basically, I set a timer that calls a function, which I don't care the name for, and that function simply calls another function that then it does that every 10 minutes. And I can just do it in 1 line. That's what fat arrow functions are. That's what they're used for. They're great for this particular purpose. When it becomes a little bit tricky is when you have to do more than 1 action. It's not that you cannot do it, it's just that it's annoying. For example, here I can say display this message box and also call the weather, right? So at this point, if you want to do this in the current version of AutoHotkey, you would have to open parentheses like this. And each action, you have to use a comma to do that for the next action. And then you would call the next function. There you go. That's basically what you are forced to do. Why is that? How does that work? In a normal function, when you have a return out here, you can return anything. You can return true, false, an object, whatever. But what if you want to do certain things and return 1 value? You can still do it. You can force an expression there with using the parentheses, call another function, and then with a comma, you can perform more and more actions, and the last action that you have is the one that gets returned. In case you didn't know, you can do that, and basically this arrow is an equivalent of this keyword called return. That's what the arrow is. It's just a function that returns this. That's it. And because this is the return, you can do the same. You can use the parentheses to do certain actions. And the last one at the end is the one that gets returned back. And in this case, I could definitely just put another action set true here. Now, what people do when they start doing this kind of stuff is that they divide it in multiple lines by doing this. And now you see the comma right here. Now they create a new line. And then you see the next comma creates a new line. So basically, as you can see, you're forced to, for each new line, have a comma. If you don't put the comma, it's going to fail, right? So that's the downside to this method of a fat arrow function, in which if you have more than 1 action, now you're forced to put a comma on each new line because you're already forcing an expression. And then it is really weird to read this because it says set a timer, perform all of this, and now you have a random number here at the end. And basically that comma right here is not the same as the commas up here. So for me, that is confusing. A lot of people, they build a whole function in there with tons of actions, and then at the end of all of those actions, they put one weird parameter that you don't no longer know what that parameter is tied to, because let's say that there were 50 lines of code in here, something like that, right? And then at the bottom here, you get this weird thing, and I'm like, well, what? Oh yeah, right. I now remember it had to do with that set timer at the top, right? So that's why I don't like it. Personally, I definitely think that fat arrow functions are great for, I would say, maximum 5 actions. I think right there, you still don't lose the idea of what you're doing. Another thing, you cannot do if statements in here easily. You cannot say, if var equals 10, call this guy, else call that guy. You cannot do that because you are in a forced expression like this. You can definitely still do that by using the ternary operations like this. You can do that. You can do a ternary here, check the value. So that's the if statement. But how about a loop? You cannot do a loop. You cannot say for whatever. So fat arrow functions are very constrained. They are not easy to set up, and you have a lot of weird rules that are not the same as your normal AutoHotkey functions. New lines must be divided with commas. You cannot do if statements. You cannot do loops. You cannot do other things. So why use it for extended things? Usually fat arrows, I just use it for very simple stuff. Show a message box and return true. That's great for a fat arrow, and usually, mainly, I use it for one-liners. If you need more than one line, hey, just define the function, it's okay. That is about to change because in V2.1, now you have the option of defining a whole function in a fat arrow function by using the brackets. You see these open and close brackets like this? You can definitely just go ahead and instead of the parentheses, you can define the whole function just like this, a normal function, by the way, and then just have a comma here and continue your timer. So now we will be able to do stuff as in JavaScript, in which people define functions everywhere, kind of like everywhere. And they do this very often. They have a timer that calls this, and inside this, they go ahead and have another thing that then defines a totally different function right there. Yeah, in that function, they do a bunch of stuff. And inside that other function, they define another function. And I'm like, dude. And then you don't know what their intention is because the function doesn't have a name. Basically, I like the fact that I can name stuff. And if I cannot name it, at least I know what the intention is because it's just one action. For example, here, I just say, oh, set the timer. Oh, it's just to show a message box and get the weather and return true because I can see the actions there. But if your timer defines a whole function without a name, I don't know what you are trying to do. And inside that function, you define another one without a name. It's just like annoying. Not illegal though. You can do whatever you want with your code. Like you can do whatever you want with your code, right? It's just like maintenance for yourself 6 months from now, or maintenance for somebody else that has never seen your code. It's going to be a nightmare. It's okay though. If you get your stuff done and it does what you want, go for it.